the fourth thing I would note is that I think that at the present moment we're sort of confronted with a tough analytical challenge, which is that we are on the one hand still trying to draw attention to the unique ways that women are disproportionately impacted by a range of issues, while at the same time arguing that gender issues need to be mainstreamed. I think it's hard to do both, to make both of those arguments at the same time. I think on the one hand, we don't want women's issues to be over here anymore and a progressive agenda to be here. We want them to be integrated. At the same time, we are in a position where we constantly have to draw attention to the way those issues uniquely play out, and I think that is I think that's a communications challenge, and I think it's also a conceptual challenge for people and groups doing work on women's rights issues. I think I just want to acknowledge that I know there's a real chicken and an egg problem here, which is that if there was more money for women's organizations, some of these issues would be much easier to address and resolve. But I also think that funders tend to also be attracted to where there is new energy and new thinking, and so it's a little bit of a self-perpetuating problem. The last thing I just wanted to say, which Allison's opening comments made me think about, was that, you know, though Allison talked about the fact that we're all, you know, relatively new to the scene as institutional funders, the fact remains that Ford has been kind of the most steadfast and consistent supporter of women's issues over the years, and I actually can't think of very many others that are endowed, you know, as opposed to women's funds. And you know, Atlantic is spending down. We don't have a dedicated women's rights portfolio. And I mean, it's a kind of lens that we apply to all of our grant making or aim to do increasingly more of. But I think it says a lot that Ford is, you know, the most enduring supporter of this field, and what it would mean if that changed. So I just wanted to kind of flag that also. So all of it. Anyway, I don't mean to be a downer, but I really look forward to the discussion that, you know, to have with all of you on all these questions.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Oliveira from the New York Women's Foundation. So I wanted to talk a little bit about us as a local women's fund, but I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the philanthropy values and practices of women's funds, which is a particular set of partners and players in philanthropy around social justice and around women. So we actually were created in 1987. I really appreciated Allison's observation, made me think about the timing. And women's funds, many times we talk about ourselves. For instance, the Miss Foundation, who couldn't be here with us, and the Third Wave Foundation, they were also going to be here in this panel, so I want to give a shout out to my partners that are always here with us, if you know what I mean, regardless if they are physically present and sitting here in the front. But I also want to give a shout out to the grantee partners of us, the New York Women's Foundation. I know that at least Natalie Rubio is here from Voices Latinas, and I want to acknowledge her. And I see so many other partners of ours here, and I wanted to acknowledge that because it's this togetherness that makes the change. So women's funds are both concerned with the content of philanthropy and investing in women's leadership, just to pick up a little bit on what Vivian was saying, but also in the process of philanthropy, also in the power relationships, in the very way that we do philanthropy, like how we do it, in and of itself, being an expression of different sets of power relationships. So what does that mean? It means that it actually understands grantees as partners that have a locus of knowledge, that are not empty vessels to which, you know, funders deposit knowledge, deposit wisdom. That is actually our ability, to the extent that we're able to listen and we're able to, as a convener as well, bring forth the work, the knowledge, the leadership, the voice. We're doing our job. that it's this exchange of resources, of knowledge, of activism, of the true life experiences that, coupled with other ways of getting knowledge, accelerates the change towards social justice. So the idea of mitigating the incredible gaps of access to power, to influence, to visibility that women's groups in general, but particularly women of color groups, immigrant groups, women who are come from communities that are financially underinvested and more challenged, that mitigating that incredible imbalance is part of our work, is part of changing the philanthropic relationship. That undoubtedly, anytime one gives money, has the money, and shares with another, there's always a relationship of power. But first of all, acknowledging that, and second, looking for the ways in which that open conversation and that discussion and that practice can be better integrated. So we are, just wanted to say, we as a group, we're very proud of how much money we give out and all that. But compared to our incredible partners sitting here and on the other tables and all that, we're a tiny funder in the world. But we have, how can I say, those incredible goals and aspirations and steadily march through them. So we see financial investment as part of what changes society. But we also see the engagement and activism as the other part that changes society. And I think it's on that part that we look to make up for what we would say some of our financial limitations. And that's because we're public foundations. We're public foundations that, for the most part, use what we like to call both a vertical and a horizontal approach to fundraising. We look at donors as activists. And we're sitting at a table where all the donors related sitting here are activists. I mean that my partners, my colleagues here represent. They are donor activists, be the Clinton Foundation, be Atlantic, be the Novo Foundation, right? So exceptional donors. That doesn't happen just in women's funds. So I think that one of the things that we contribute to philanthropy that is unique is the ability to be very close to the ground. And at the same time, that's one of the challenges that we have. And I think that the issue of, I'm going to use this word, but it's kind of funky, but the issue of bringing things up to scale. But I'm going to say, how do we seize bigger space in the cultural discourse, in the political discourse, in shaping what happens in larger levels of society. So we struggle with producing what we call systemic change. And we look at that at both the importance in funding community organizing, funding advocacy, funding leadership, but knowing that the kinds of investments that are needed for accelerated change are huge financial investments. So in my last minute, I think that I want to say that we also dwell with how do we make the connections between the daily knowledge, struggles, strength, power of community work and women's lives and their work and the global larger issues that we are, all of us, in all localities dealing with. How do we bridge in an effective way? How do we harness the local energy, and how do we bridge that effectively with larger movements, global movements? And like Vivian and like Penny said before, we're all practicing partnerships. We're all trying to learn how to work together, and in doing that, maximizing our impact.
Thank you. Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you to Allison and Linda for chairing this panel. So I am from the Novo Foundation, and I will start just by sharing the mission of the Novo Foundation. The mission of the Novo Foundation is that we seek a transformation in global society from a culture of domination and exploitation to partnership and collaboration, empowering girls and women as the primary agents of change. So, the foundation is, when I say it still, I have to say, I think, as we all know in this room, there's not a lot of philanthropic focus entirely, or really predominantly really based in the experiences of girls and women. So as I say that, I'm very conscious of that and feel very proud to have come into a foundation for whom girls and women is really at the center. Within the foundation, we really focus on three main areas. One is economic empowerment of adolescent girls in developing countries. And we do that work with our partner, the Nike Foundation, and I can come back to that during questions. We also focus on social and emotional learning for children in the United States. And thirdly, we focus on ending violence against girls and women. And I'll just share a couple of key points about sort of that work and how we come to it and what it looks like. I think, first of all, we see ending violence against women and girls as fundamental to doing anything else to promote girls' and women's equality in the world. And that when girls and women are not safe anywhere in the world, we will not be able to make the kind of social change that we need for ourselves and for the rest of the world. So we really see that as such a critical entry point to changing the situation on the ground for girls and women everywhere. I think the second point about our work on ending violence against girls and women is that when the Nova Foundation started in 2006, or really scaled up in 2006, a letter came. The foundation is run by Jennifer and Peter Buffett, who Peter Buffett is the son of Warren Buffett, and Jennifer is his daughter-in-law. And they got a fax from Peter's father, which said, announcing that they were going to be getting a big gift, some big resources to be able to do good in the world and to have this foundation. And he didn't give a lot of advice, but the advice he gave was to focus on a few things and do them well, and to go where others were not going, right? To take up issues that were not already being addressed, and to really, really focus and be very specific in what they were trying to focus on. So I think that has been sort of underlying all of the work of the Nova Foundation and how we strategically invest, in that we don't invest very broadly on all of the issues of violence against women and girls all over the world, which are enormous and massive and we couldn't do, but that we really develop very targeted strategic interventions, which we think are going to have the most impact and be able to bring others into this space and to encourage other donors that it's not that scary, that they can also invest in ending violence against women and girls. A third point I would say about our work on ending violence against women and girls is that we focus both in the United States and out of the United States. And a lot of people, when I first started in this job, they said, but are you domestic or international? And I was like, but we're global. We're global. And they said, oh, so you're international. And I was like, no, we're global. We're global. Like, we in this country, we have violence against women and girls here also. And we are part of the global community. But I was so struck by really how much people were making those distinctions, and I'm sure all of you have seen that as well. And for us, it is so important to always make the argument and really highlight that it is not that different. What happens to girls and women in the United States is not that different than what's happening to girls and women in Nepal, in Kenya, in Brazil, in Sweden. I mean, that we really need to look at these as global problems and find global solutions. And finally, the last thing I'll say is about our work on ending violence against girls and women is that one of the things that we're really committed to in this work is, as much as possible, really trying to put this in the frame, in a kind of social justice frame, and to really get ahead of the problem as much as possible, and to support the groups that are really working to change the culture in which violence against women and girls happens all the time and is allowed to happen all the time. And that there's such big needs out there in this area, but as much as possible, we're really trying to find those places where that kind of work is happening.